finish 1 Corinthians. So let me back y'all up so that y'all can understand. During Jesus' ministry, he had 12 disciples. Judas Iscariot, he betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver coins, led up to the point of Jesus' crucifixion. Once Jesus passed, his 11 disciples became apostles. He was like, all right, my body died, but my spirit's living. I'm gonna give y'all the Holy Spirit so that y'all can go and tell others about me. Because remember, back then there wasn't social media, there wasn't the news, there was none of that. Ooh, I got too excited because now they were filled with the Holy Spirit once Jesus appeared to them when he rose. They all started preaching the gospel to other places, other countries. There was this dude named Saul at that time. He did not like Jesus' people at all. He would prosecute him. When that happened, he was actually on his way to mess with Christ's followers. Jesus appeared to him. Jesus was like, why are you doing this to my people? Like, what's wrong with you? Remember, the apostles had faith to do what Jesus would do through his ministry here, which is healing the sick, the demon-possessed people. They would be able to heal them. They could even go as far as reviving people from the dead. Saul ended up going to one of the apostles. I can't remember which one, but he gave him his sight back and he's like, all right, I believe now. Like, Jesus is real. It happened to me. Because Saul was born again, his name was then changed to Paul. Paul started preaching the good news to different places. This man did a lot, and he was beaten. He's been to jail. He was going through it. He didn't care. He kept preaching the good news because he knew that God forgave him for everything. He felt unworthy, which is what many of us feel like. Paul started building foundations for churches through God, obviously. So this is the Corinth, Agora, and Lower City. This is somewhere nearby where the Corinthian church would be. This shows the map of Paul's first and second missionary journey. So he went through all these places, all those countries. I write notes. I fully dissect each Bible verse, each book. Since Paul founded the Corinthian church, he wrote a letter to them because he was like, hey, y'all are tripping. Y'all are over here speaking in tongues and doing all these things. Like, yes, there is that gift, but there's also different gifts, and y'all are over here worrying about this one. But not everyone has that gift. There are 2 kinds of speaking in tongues. There's the tongues of angels, which no one else understands them. Thus, they need an interpreter. This goes to Corinthians 14:28. And then there's the tongues of people, which people miraculously speak to someone in their own language without training. Like, let's say you were to go to China and you don't know Mandarin. All of a sudden, to speak about Christ, you were able to have that gift. Paul was saying that there's these other gifts, and it's like us with our body. If we were not to have a piece of hand, that's not a complete body. If we weren't to have a foot, that's not a complete body. We were not to have a head. Like, we need all these parts. So why are y'all only making it seem like we only need the gift of tongues? Paul even said that he was able to speak in tongues, but he would much rather prophesy than to be speaking 10,000 words, basically saying gibberish when no one could understand what he's saying. He would much rather prophesy about Jesus Christ than to speak in tongues, especially when there's no interpreter. Paul's like, all right, the letter was so good that I'm going to write them a second letter. In this letter, he emphasizes apostleship comes from God's authority and not his own. So remember the 12 apostles that I was talking about? I don't even deserve this because of what I've done in my past, yet God has forgiven me, and I am able to preach the gospel, which I think I've probably done more than the other apostles that were there through Jesus' ministry. Paul goes on to talk about how because of his suffering, he is able to comfort others, and that is through God. This is what happens to many of us. Like me, for example, because of my past, old me was selfish. It's like, people they gotta toughen up. They gotta go through whatever they gotta go through. Now, through Christ, that I have the Holy Spirit and I am more patient, I am more kind, I try to be better. Through Christ, through the Holy Spirit, I am able to preach the good news, but also be there for people and tell them, hey, I've been there too, but what if I told you that all of that could be fixed? Remember I told you about the piece that makes no sense? Guess what? Not a lot of people can get that. And I didn't know that. You cannot get that unless you have a relationship with God. This is what Paul's talking about. His experience of comfort and suffering enables him to comfort others.